to the second day of our two-day seminar. Welcome to those of you who are just joining us today for the first time. It's lovely to see you. I've got a couple of things that I just need to say before we start with the first keynote. For those of you who are new to the venue today, I can tell you that the men's toilets and the accessible toilets are on this floor. If you go out to a little corridor there and turn right, they are down that corridor on the right. For the ladies, if you go up the stairs in the main reception area and turn left, then the ladies on the left up there. The other thing I need to say is that if there is a fire alarm, it will not be a drill, it will be an actual emergency, so there are no drills planned for today. And fire alarm exits are marked by the green fire exit signs. And then the point where we all gather together is down the drive on the left-hand side. Okay. Another thing I need to ask you, because after the first keynote we're going to have a break for, we're going straight into the workshops for the morning, and so far not many people have signed up for the workshops, so I'm just going to pass these around now and ask you if you would kindly indicate which workshop you will be going to. And that's all. Enjoy the session. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone, nice to see everyone again. The keynote this morning is going to be by Māori. She's an associate professor at the University of Waikato. She's been teaching me Māori this morning, so I'm hoping I'm going to pronounce everything correctly. Her early research involved collaborative work with schools, Māori students, their families and communities through the formation of culturally responsible relationships. And this work merged with the inception of Te Kotahitanga and was further built upon in 2014 with Ki Eki Hanuku. This iterative professional development initiative aimed to promote Māori student educational success as Māori by combining understandings from Kaupapa Māori and critical theory of policy. Ongoing evidence of educational disparities for Māori continues to make this work a priority, and she publishes widely in this field. This morning she's going to talk about education for equality, excellence and belonging as Māori. So please join me in her warm welcome.
Ngā mana, ngā reo, ngā maunga, ngā awa, ngā pataka o ngā taonga tuku. So, to your personal prestige, to your languages, your mountains, your rivers, I greet you this morning as I greet the land on which we live. For many students in New Zealand, Māori students, equity and excellence and belonging is not the reality as education continues to underserve specific groups of clearly identified students. This is not a recent phenomenon, nor does it relate just to New Zealand. As a country, the prevailing discourses of equity and equal opportunities ring loud and clear. As a nation, we proudly celebrate historical figures who have contributed to our heritage, where commitment to social justice is held in high regard. Unfortunately, for many people, particularly Māori, the reality falls far short of the rhetoric. So, who am I? Well, I'm a descendant of Ngā Tūhoe, the people of the mist, Ngāti Awa, the people of the river, and Ngāti Whare, the people of the house. I'm a descendant of Rongokarai, and there is my ancestral house. It's built in the shadows of our sacred summits, alongside our waterway, Ohene Mataroa. I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a life partner, I'm a mother-in-law, a grandmother, a teacher, a learner, and a colleague. I believe that I am privileged to be all of these things and to be able to get up every day to do work that both challenges me and challenges others. I'm going to move through that process today, so I'll do a lot of talking, but I won't talk to the slides. I'm assuming that if you have difficulty seeing the screen, you will put yourself somewhere where you can see it, and if you have difficulty hearing my voice, that you'll have sat yourself in a position where you can hear me as well. So that's where I think I'm going to go in the time that I have. Māori are considered to be the first people of New Zealand, arriving in the land that they called Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud, in about 700 AD. Our civilization and culture were well established when the land was discovered by British in the late 1700s. Renamed New Zealand, a deliberate colonisation of the country followed. And although this was largely peaceful in comparison to many of the other colonisations over other nations within the 17th and 18th centuries, there were disastrous consequences for Māori. A key event in the colonising of New Zealand was the signing in 1840 of the Treaty of Waitangi by Māori tribal leaders and the British Crown representatives. The treaty mandated a partnership relationship and established British governments in return for Māori or tribal ownership and protection of their land interests and their cultural treasures. However, the sovereignty guaranteed to Māori was increasingly ignored, resulting in dire consequences for Māori cultural, social and economic well-being well into the 20th century. The promises remained largely unfulfilled until ongoing political lobbying and protests by tribal groups seeking redress for the promises of the treaty finally saw the passing of the Treaty of Waitangi Act in 1975 and the establishment of the Waitangi Tribunal. Both of these events had enabled Māori to begin to claim for the breaches of the treaty back to 1840 and have seen the Crown seek to clarify its position with respect to the treaty's application. As Crown policy, this treaty continues to shape the bicultural relationship between Māori and Pākehā, the descendants of the colonials, and influence government policy in contemporary New Zealand society. It has, in particular, influenced government policy, including education policy. All policies are expected, or government policies are expected to include this idea of participation, protection, and partnership. However, the reality is a little bit different. And in New Zealand, we have people that position themselves along this continuum. So we've got people on the far side who understand and they're committed to the Treaty of Waitangi, they're committed to the partnership between Māori and non-Māori. On the other side, we have people who absolutely reject that. They resist it. They say that it's a historic document and it should be ignored. So, what we need to do in schools anyway, one of the things that we've found that we need to do is to disrupt this continua of where people believe they are, whether they reject it, whether they support it. Because we find that these people over here, unfortunately, are the loudest voices. And as we seek to make changes in education, the status quo of the voices on this side are by far the most powerful. And we get a situation where what we're trying to do is move people up that way, but of course they keep pulling back to the right, to the left, sorry. One of the things that I think we're increasingly doing is drawing on the theorising of Paulo Freire. And that notion there of washing one's hand of the conflict between the powerful and the powerless means to side with the powerful, not to be neutral. And that is one of the things that we are really trying to make teachers in schools understand and be part of. In general, Māori students do not do as well in our education system as other students. They do not remain in schooling as long, nor are they achieving as highly. Despite many initiatives to raise Māori student achievement, English medium schooling continues to return lower achievement rates for Māori than for non-Māori students. For example, in 2015, 62% of Māori students left school with NCA Level 2. Now, Level 2 is our national qualification of educational achievement. It's our official secondary school, or one of our official secondary school achievements. So that's 62% of Māori in comparison to 83% of non-Māori. So that gap between Māori and non-Māori continues through the education system. But one of the things that we've found is if this is the prevailing discourse of the fabric of New Zealand society, is it any wonder that our students are disproportionately served in the education system? A significant contribution to this factor, of course, is the culturally subtractive approach to education policy that has lasted well into the 1980s. The purpose of schooling being seen as assimilating Māori students into Western ways of thinking and succeeding, the retention of the Māori language, culture and values regarded as a threat, inhibiting the process of colonising Māori. A movement of resistance to colonisation or decolonisation by Māori in the 1970s, and at the same time towards revitalising and reclaiming things Māori through Māori self-determination has become known as kaupapa Māori. Graham Smith contends kaupapa Māori approaches involve retrieving the space to undertake activities that Māori believe will be of value to them, and where the traditional or powerful communities are open to the need for greater Māori involvement. In doing so, kaupapa Māori research, for example, must attend to the legacies of past researcher imposition on Māori by ensuring issues of power are addressed, while the use of Māori voices and metaphors are ways to retrieve space and revitalise Māori knowledge. It is crucial in the dialogic and spiralling nature of the construction of knowledge that power sharing and reciprocity remain paramount. This must be done within a process that seeks to understand through the voices of the people themselves. So I'm going to present two stories over 20 years. The first story comes from the voices of Māori youth within schools in New Zealand and began in 1996. So 3 different projects, and my introducer named 2 of those projects. The second story relates to the political climate, what was going on in terms of the policies and the practices across the education sector. So that's also where I think I'm going to take you this morning, sorry. Well, it would be afternoon. Still trying to catch up with myself. So in 1995, I was part of this group of researchers over here, and we were contracted by the Ministry of Education to develop a behavioural response for use across school and home settings. We sought to work in collaboration with a group of teachers and a group of families. we already had very strong relationships with these people, and that's why we chose to begin the work there. The idea that we would develop something that came from a Māori worldview, so that although this gentleman over here, Professor Ted Glynn, was the trainer of all of the educational psychologists in New Zealand at the time, the fact that he was on our group and had some great ideas actually were not as important as this wonderful woman over here, who's a Māori elder. So what we were trying to do was to actually draw upon both worldviews, and Auntie Nan, or Lady Whakehiru Walker, that amazing woman there, really was the holder of knowledge that we wanted to be able to draw upon. So that's what we were asked to do. We didn't realise at the time that this group, and some of them are here at Waikari Marae, where we had lots of our meetings, this group of students who are in year 7 and 8, so 11, 12, some of them may have been 13-year-olds, how important they would become. We as the adults have thought, yes, we know we've got to work with whānau, we know that we've got parents, wider community, we know that we have to work with teachers, but we hadn't actually figured that we had to work with the students as closely as we did. These voices here come from the 40+ students who supported us. Not only did the students become the bosses and the directors of the video that we developed, they volunteered to write about aspects of it. They agreed to become part of the research project. They wrote part of the reports that were sent to the Ministry of Education. They presented the reports to the Ministry of Education, and their presentations were delivered so confidently and completely that the Ministry of Education provided additional funding to send those children down to the University of Otago, where the videos were to be edited. So Ted and I, who were leading that research, quickly discovered that actually we'd better start listening to these students. And we're pleased that we did, because the program that we developed and then trialled and then developed for other schools would not have been what it was without this group of Māori students. Their contribution was, sorry, I'm going backwards. Their contribution was essential to filming, to editing, and to the program that was subsequently developed. We learned from these students and their families what could be achieved when students were afforded the power and the space to contribute. So that's what was important, I think, about the first piece. What was really interesting about that is now those students are parents themselves, and they watch as the government, instead of rolling this program out to other schools, spent millions of dollars importing a behavioural program from the United States as what we should be doing. Those students are now parents themselves. In 2001, again using kaupapa Māori methodologies, principals, teachers, family members and years 9 and 10 students, so that's from 12 to about 15-year-olds, from 5 secondary school communities were asked what, in their experience, would engage them in education, would engage them in learning. The pervasive discourse of students across all schools, and confirmed by many of their teachers and parents, was the overwhelming deficit theorising about Māori students. For me, having been a student and then a teacher in this system, very little change was evident. Those stories are presented in that book, Culture Speaks. Teachers have been asked to identify 2 groups, students who were engaged with learning and students who were not engaged with learning. And when we looked at the difference between the engaged and non-engaged, in those voices you will see that there was basically two major differences. The engaged Māori students were prepared to leave their culture at school gate. They were prepared to learn the game that was education. They were prepared to be silenced and to play the game that they had to in order to succeed. The non-engaged students, they were the ones that very quickly got stood down, sat outside principal's office and booted out of schools. You may have some students like that in the UK, I'm sure you do. To engage in learning, groups of students from over the years have told us that educators need to provide a pedagogy that is relational, but from which they can be self-determining. What this means for teachers has been rather perplexing, but students were very clear about what this meant. And if you have a look at those, and I'll give you a little bit of time to have a look at them, you can see what they meant. Students described positive relationships with teachers as those that they were not talked down to, where power was shared, and where teachers were committed to their students' success. Students consistently argued relationships of trust and respect as being essential and foundational to their engagement in learning. Once a relational pedagogy had been established within which students' cultural identity is both acceptable and accepted, students wanted a pedagogy within which they could construct new learning from their own, Brenner uses the term cultural toolkit. Rather than marginalise their prior knowledge and experiences, or try to impose a transmission expert model of learning for the majority of their schooling experience, young people wanted to bring their own funds of knowledge to their learning, in both understanding the curriculum content and in the construction of new knowledge. In 2001, this was seldom their experience. The centrality of culture in the contemporary world to living and learning continues to be very perplexing for many New Zealanders, Māori and non-Māori alike. One of the main challenges comes from seeing Māori culture as more than merely ceremonial in nature, able to be manipulated at will in order to fit within the dominant culture, instead of being integral to the normal way of being Māori, the normal way of Māori experiencing the world. Being able to manage the tensions between both of these worlds without forcing a choice or compromising either is the serious challenge. Prioritising time for understanding the importance of culture, our own culture, and the culture of others, when a Māori world intersects with the world of Pākehā or non-Māori. An engaging and culturally responsive context, I believe, has much to teach us all. In the development of all of our research projects, we found that we learned more when spaces were created for both peoples to first share and respect their own identities and experiences as the basis for new relationships. Bringing their own experiences to the learning through active social engagement with others requires determined opportunities for dialogue to occur throughout learning. Contexts such as these allow learners the opportunity to both seek advice and ask questions of other students without fear of embarrassment or reprimand. Thus, all of the expertise in the class is activated instead of relying solely upon the expertise of the teacher. When the voices of Māori students from 2001 were first shared with educators in New Zealand and then later published in 2006, they were considered groundbreaking. For the first time, educators and policymakers could see and read about the impact of their practices on Māori youth and more importantly, what they could do to promote greater engagement and success. By altering the relationships, the power relationships and pedagogies within classrooms, teachers found that students' cultural values could enhance cognitive engagement and subsequent achievement. For those of you who would like to look what the teaching practice looks like, you could look that up on our website, which I believe the Ministry of Education may threaten to close down on us, but it's still going 3 years after Te Kotahitanga was finished. The last project that I'm going to talk about is Kia Panaku. Kia Panaku is to build on. And like most governments, just when you think you've actually answered some questions and you know what you're doing, oh yes, that's finished, move on and start the new thing. The New Zealand government, to their credit, they had a great idea. They decided that we would build on the success of 5 programs over 3 institutions, put us into a forced marriage and say, there you go, there's the money, build on that success. You may imagine that developing that type of relationship did take a bit of time, but the success or the realisation or the promise of that opportunity was great. We were funded across those 3 institutions to work in 1/3 of New Zealand secondary schools, where the greatest percentage of Māori students are, from the North Island right down to the bottom of the South Island. So we all said, yes, we can do that. It just took us a year to begin the doing. To sort out the relationship across 3 institutions who really wanted to participate, but weren't sure whose voices needed to be heard. So one of the things that we wanted to do in Kia Panaku was not just achieve Māori success, but we wanted to achieve it in terms of a new way of being. We wanted to achieve Māori success as Māori. So if you think about those earlier students, we wanted them not to have to compromise their culture just to get the achievement at the other end, the qualification at the other end, the qualification deemed by the school. So one of the things that we found was that teachers would say, yes, but what does success as Māori mean? And we would say, well, it means what the students tell you it means. Yes, but do I have to lower my expectations of the curriculum? No, I don't think that's what it means at all. If you think about what you want out of education for your sons and daughters, your grandchildren, your nieces and nephews, I'm fairly sure that that's what I want for me. So success as Māori means different things for many people. But what we wanted to do was to find out actually what did it mean for these students. We were so good at telling people to go look for themselves and to ask the students. We thought we'd better do the same ourselves. Enjoying and achieving education success, Hikitia, I'm going to come back to that because that policy did come out of programs like Te Kotahitanga. Once again, right? 3 clicks and delete. So, what was the procedure we followed? Well, we got a group of academics, Māori, non-Māori academics, New Zealand academics, academics from overseas, and we got them to put up a straw man. We said, what do you think it means? And then we decided that we would ask students who believed that they had succeeded at school as Māori without having to compromise their identity. And we put this out right at the end of the year, after the ceremonies of who succeeded at school or not, after the prize giving ceremonies, and we thought, Will these students want to come and talk with us? Because actually by then they were officially finished. But we decided we would go ahead with this. We invited them to 9 different marae from the top of the North Island right down to the bottom of the South Island. And we asked schools to bring some students who they believe and who the students believe had succeeded as Māori. We gave them the questions before they arrived, and they knew that they would need to be talking with us about that particular topic. So everybody came knowing what they were expected to do. They came from an adult with their school. They were welcomed onto the marae. Right on the very second slide, I showed a picture of my marae, my meeting house, my ceremonial house. So all of these hui were held following appropriate Māori cultural procedures. They were held inside those meeting houses, and they were there for the kaupapa or the agenda of finding out what these students who had succeeded as Māori, defined by themselves, what these Māori students thought that looked like. So what did they tell us? Well, despite the fact that we thought it was the end of the year and these students would be off on holiday or had started work or were having a good time, we got a good number of students that attended, and we got 2/3 of our schools who, despite that time being very busy, came. There were 2 students who attended who were not Māori, and there was 1 student who came from a school that wasn't a Kia Pānuku school. And that was interesting why that student came. That student came because he belonged to the marae where we were holding the meeting. And so his nanny said, they're going to be talking about Māori education, success as Māori, you need to go down there, my boy, and be part of it. So we listened to all of these people. We listened to the students. We listened not to the adults that were in the room, but we listened to the students. And it was an amazing experience. I'm not sure what it's like at the end of your year, but at the end of my year, I'm fairly exhausted because I run on high octane for most of the time. Then I just go, but it was a very energising process to go from marae to marae to marae, to listen to these students tell the most amazing stories about what they believe success as Māori meant. Okay, this has got a sticky bit. So, success as Māori. Overall, the key messages of these Māori youths was about overcoming the negative stereotypes that we first heard about in 2001. So, although there were 15 years between the stories that were given in 2001 to the stories in 2015, that continued to be the biggest challenge. The other message that we heard, that Māori, being Māori, was not unidimensional. Māori is actually a colonising word. It came from the coloniser, and it was used to collectivise the tribes. And we're doing that today in New Zealand to people from the different Pacific Island groups. We've got this new term, Pacifica. So we're collectivising a group of people for, I'm not sure whose benefit, certainly not for theirs. But one of the things that was amazing to hear from these students was, no, my Māori cultural identity depends on my tribal identity. I'm not Māori, I'm Tūhoe. I'm not Māori, I'm Tainui. So it went right back to their tribal roots. Also, being Māori was not about, when I went to school, all Māori could sing. I'll let you off the hook about my singing ability. And we could play the guitar. And we were great at sports. Well, I didn't tick any of those boxes. What these students were telling us was another pushback in that direction, I believe. That actually, they didn't just want to be seen as the sports success. They wanted the academic success as well. They didn't want just the cultural success. They wanted all-around success. Often, another one of the pervasive discourses was that often they were the first in the whānau to reach, first in their family to reach those heights. And they believed that they had an overall responsibility to play that success forward. Being able to contribute to the success of others was really important for them. So this is one of the groups of students at the very first marae that we went to, which was in the centre of the North Island at Lake Taupo, if you know New Zealand geography. And so everybody that was there, and you can see some of them have started holidays and weren't prepared to put their school uniforms back on, but some of them were quite happy to attend in their school uniforms. So there's the teachers, there are the whānau, the family members, and there are all of the students that attended that particular day. Many young people talked about, as I said, being the first in their family. They talked about benefiting from being provided with timely, explicit guidance and direction, which would help them to build upon their own experiences, but also the experiences of others. Right, so in beginning story 2, how am I going for time? 10 minutes time. Māori have not been passive bystanders during this upheaval. They were active determinants of the pathway education should take. Māori elders have become increasingly strident in voicing their discontent with the status quo of an education system where Māori consistently neither enjoyed nor achieved education success. A series of 4 meetings, hui, meetings run along Māori cultural principles, were hosted by a tribal group to listen to elders, to Māori parents and grandparents speak of their aspirations and hopes for their children. The first hui was held in February 2001. It resulted in 107 recommendations based around the family, the Māori language, the custom and equality in education, Māori participation in the education system, and the purpose of education. Many of these recommendations were incorporated into education policy and directives from the Ministry of Education. There was also wide agreement by the attendees that the 3 goals for Māori education should be, and in this order, to live as Māori, to actively participate as citizens of the world, and to enjoy good health and a high standard of living. To their credit, politicians and ministry officials listened respectfully and openly to the pleas made and solutions proposed by tribal leaders. What those elders were trying to do was to push back on this reality. It had been their reality, it had been their children's reality, and it continues to be the reality of our grandchildren. Put the mask on and play the game that is education. That is portrayed in this amazing painting by Hikitia. So making the difference together. Māori have never said we want a separate education system, although we have a separate Māori language or kura kaupapa Māori education system, but only 5% of Māori students are in that system. So it's a system whereby the education is all through the medium of Te Reo Māori. However, the biggest proportion of our children are in mainstream or English medium, as we like to call it. In response to the growing understandings that a system-level response to Māori underachievement was required, the Ministry of Education embarked on a series of policy initiatives. These have included the first Māori education strategy launched in 1999. This first strategy recognised that Māori educational success was a ministry-wide responsibility. It created an environment that led to a range of new initiatives, including iwi education partnerships, professional development programs such as Kia Pāniku, a communication campaign, and the appointment of Māori community liaison officers. This was quickly followed in 2006 by the first of 3 Hikitia strategies. The vision of Hikitia is simply stated, Māori enjoying and achieving education success as Māori. And I remember the first time I heard those words. I was actually working as a researcher in the Ministry of Education, and we played with those words for days. Māori enjoying and achieving education. That in itself would be pretty amazing. But we wanted to go for everything, this success as Māori. So the first time that policy went out, it was for the Ministry of Education itself. Hikitia, the name of it, means to step up. And it was the first time that they saw themselves in deficit terms as needing to do something more than what they were already doing, as needing to step up. That followed in 2008 for schools. And unfortunately, it went out to schools, and I remember that there was a lot of anger amongst the school. Not as you might imagine, because they didn't want to do it. There was a huge amount of will, and there still is, amongst educators to make a difference. So the will was there, the moral purpose of wanting to do something different was there, but what wasn't there was the how. They didn't know what to do, and I remember one principal say to me, Mary, if you think I've got it down in the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet and I just have to bend out and pick up the solutions, then you're dreaming. So the strategy was there, the will was there, but what the ministry didn't back that up with was how they might make a difference. In 2013, the Hikitia was refreshed. That means we haven't done it yet, so we'd better have another go at refreshing the strategy and putting it out to schools. And I remember in Kia Pāniku talking to groups of school leaders and saying, okay, so we're going to use Hikitia as, and they would say, what? What are we using? What's that? And it had been in the education sector for such a long time, and still there were people who didn't know how to do it, never heard about it, and so that became our mandate. This is what we're doing. We're giving life to Hikitia. But schools needed a lot of help to understand what that looked like and what that could be like in their schools. So while it had become a political imperative, that wasn't enough in itself to actually make the difference. So we could work with teachers, we could work with leaders, help them understand what would make the difference for the amount of students in terms of the pedagogical approach. We had a policy that could make a difference across the system, but it still wasn't making the system change. Okay. However, this is what we've got this year. It was tried last year. And this is ERO, which is our version of Ofsted. And so, as well as having the policy statement, we now have the social imperative that learners are central. And the very first question that schools are now asked when they are evaluated using the framework is, what is happening for your Māori students? This is proving to be very interesting. Rather than schools being resistant to this, they're now saying, please help us. We need to know what to do. Please help us. So it's a long struggle, and you do need to be, my father would say, stubborn. You do have to have that sort of don't give up attitude, but it's taken a number of years, and I wouldn't say that we've got there yet, but we have the pedagogy in place, we know what works in the classrooms, we have a strategy that finishes at the end of this year, interestingly enough, and we now have an evaluation framework that reinforces all of the work from the research over years. We've continued to learn from our youth who have many solutions for our education system. However, it is clear that those who maintain power within the system must create safe context where voices of our youth will not only be heard, but they will be listened to. If Māori youth are to be truly self-determining, then those who hold the power must be prepared to share it. Part of our narrative as researchers has been how we, with the best of intentions, perpetuate the status quo. When we sit as the lone authority on what is best for students. However, when we draw on the knowledge and experiences of our young people and honour the self-determination and activism that they bring, the very change we are seeking can at long last begin to emerge. Thank you.
Very inspirational and interesting. Thank you. So, we've got 5-10 minutes for questions. Any questions or comments? Thank you.
It's a very good example of how marginalized or underrepresented, I would say, Māori group have been actively involved in the education system. The main for the job that we were trying to involve this time in order to let them at least achieve well, although as you said, we're still evaluating the program. But do you think this is how Māori students were actually achieving at school before actually trying out these things? Is related to cultural perspective? Because when you say some of the students were not strong enough in their cultural identity, does that might give a representation that even the culture might not be accepting those kind of Māori students who are not dealing with them well? And accordingly, does the youth projects work on not only on the education itself, but on the culture and how to make a difference, how to make this kind of correlation between the education and the culture and the public?
There is a huge discourse in New Zealand. It sort of goes like this: they don't even know they're married, so why do we have to bother? I'll give you a couple of examples of how well they do know who they are. In one school, the school had on their books, well, in 2001, Māori children were not expected to identify their ethnicity. We're all New Zealanders, we're all Kiwis. So we don't need to know who they are. Kiwis, we can see who we are. One of our first pushbacks was you need to ask students and Māori students can self-identify. So I've got grandchildren who have tribal links, but they also have links to Samoa and to Switzerland. They can self-identify as Māori, and they do. They identify those tribal links. So there was this huge discourse in New Zealand that we don't even know who we are. But there was also in 2001 a clear understanding that to be Māori in school was not a good place, was not a good thing to be. It was not safe to be Māori in our schools because you were picked on, you were told you were paru, you saw that, so if you could pass and you wanted to go to university, guess what? You left it out the gate. You didn't celebrate the fact that you were who you were. One school in particular said, I know we've got more Māori students, but actually it only says on our roll we've got 12% of Māori students. So they had been part of Te Kotahi. And what they did was, after their second year in Te Kotahi, they said, look, we've made a mistake. We need you to re-enroll. Because we don't think our enrolments have gone through properly. The re-enrolment resulted in 42% of people actually identifying as Māori. So it had become safe to be who you were. The sad thing about people who succeed in the education system, who are Māori, is that you actually get ridiculed by both non-Māori and Māori. That's the other thing. There's a saying in New Zealand, and I think that in Canada there's a similar one that I've heard. But in New Zealand, you're called a potato. You're brown on the outside, but white on the inside. There's one in Canada, isn't there?
Oh yeah, your apples is your red on the outside and white on the inside.
Yeah. So there's a double whammy. But it comes down to being not safe to identify who you are. One of the things that I've seen in education across the world is that there's this discourse about we have to become experts on their culture and then we teach them who they are. Guess what? That does not go down well in my country. But that is what a lot of teachers believe, that in order for Māori to succeed, all I've got to do is tell them who they are and infuse Māori things into the curriculum, and that'll fix them up. But it is that mentality of fixing them up rather than accessing their potential. I hope that's answered.
One more quick question. I'm interested in both the continuities and the differences, I suppose, between Indigenous and diaspora experiences, because a lot of what you're describing in this context, we have in the UK the Roma families who are often invisible because they don't self-describe, we talked about that yesterday. And yeah, I wanted to ask, I suppose, how you're describing a particular population in New Zealand, how the continuities between what you're saying and doing and your migrant, your diaspora people arriving in New Zealand who also have identity and culture and linguistic challenges.
So it's a very good question. Under the Treaty of Waitangi, recent immigrants are termed tauiwi. That's the Māori word for them. And they sit under the crown. So they sit beside Pākehā tauiwi, so the recent immigrants. What we've learned through the research is that when we get the bicultural partnership or relationship sorted out, then we'll get it sorted out better for those recent immigrants. What currently happens in many schools is they've got that relationship sorted out, they get extra support, they get extra help, but Māori don't. So what we've learned is that what can work for Māori will work for that group better. What works for that group doesn't necessarily work for Māori.
It's a high diversity, but as you said, it's seeing people for who they are.
Absolutely.
Actually seeing people as opposed
Absolutely.
to letting them.
And also seeing them for the potential that exists with them, not the problem, and we have to fix up for them. Which means take away. Keep sure of that.
I'm sure it's going to, I think you just discussed this over coffee, but unfortunately we've had a workshop today.
So we have an hour now for workshop choices. Can I ask whether the sign-up sheets are somewhere in the room? You have to. And in this room, Mamadou, where's Mamadou? Is he here?
Yes.
He's here, okay. Mamadou is doing a workshop on generating pedagogies of disruption. In Ibrahim, which is a small room on this floor, outside and to the left. Deline is running a workshop on decolonizing mathematics. And also in